tests are being pushed to sites across Ontario, and hospitals are now trying to figure out how they'll actually be used. For more, I'm joined live by Michelle Hoad, CEO of the Medical Laboratory Professionals Association of Ontario. Michelle, good to see you.
Good to see you, Lena.
I think a lot of people are wondering how these rapid tests will actually work, especially in hospital settings. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so right now we have, from what I understand, they push them out to a variety of locations. So the whole factor they're looking at now is around safety. So if you think about when a test goes into a lab, there's actually what they call a biosafety cabinet where they're able, and you can see those on some of the videos that they show, where you've got the technologists and they actually get the test and they put it underneath, and it's safe in that environment. So you need that in order to run the test. So we have a lot of rural remote communities that don't have that unit, so they're not going to be able to use them. But now when they start thinking around how are those going to roll out to long-term care homes, if there's no biosafety cabinets, how are the tests going to work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I want to ask you also about the challenges with these tests, if you can elaborate on that, and also remote communities. How will testing work there, and what does that look like?
Right, and that's what they're trying to figure out right now. So they're trying to figure out, A, do they have a biosafety cabinet? How's that going to work? So a machine would be put in probably inside a lab, and there will probably be most likely an assistant that will load it, a technologist that will interpret those results. So they're trying to figure all of that out right now. Again, there is concern around the test. Like I think we've just talked about this last week around how their reliability. So we're always concerned about that, knowing that the PCR test is the most valid world-class standard test being used across the entire world right now.
And that brings me to my next question, because, Michelle, there have been concerns about the accuracy surrounding these rapid tests. Is that something you agree with? Should people be concerned? And how heavily should we be relying on these rapid tests?
I think it should be a valid concern amongst anyone that decides to utilize them. We are well aware that they do have limitations. As I said, the PCR test is the best test to use. Again, that goes into a lab. We now have these new tests that are limited. And so we need to just make sure that our eyes are open and that we are clear that they are limited, and we've got to use that data very carefully.
I know the federal government has purchased millions of these tests. In your expert opinion, when do you see these actually being rolled out? In hospital settings? When might we see them at airports if people want to travel and be tested on the spot? What do you think?
Lena, that's a really great question. So we were advised by the government that they should be in our labs by the middle of November. So we are close to the end of November. There's still validation that's happening. There are still labs trying to figure out how they're going to use them. As I said at the onset, they're still trying to figure out the safety issue. So an example is, if that test goes into a long-term care home, most likely the person that's going to open that tube up is going to need to wear full PPE, which means mask, gown. So the question is, every new one that's opened, do they replace all of that, knowing there's a shortage of PPE? So every step along this process with regards to these rapid tests are being looked at. How are they going to work? Who's going to use them? And ultimately, how do we keep people safe that open those tubes up?
Oh, so many questions. Such an interesting conversation. We'll have to leave it there, Michelle. Thanks so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too.